What's up, guys? I'm James Bainey, and I'm here with Kyle Larson, and we are getting ready to do a spoiler-filled book discussion on Light of the Jedi. Stick around. All right, Kyle, this is it, man. Deep dive. First book in the High Republic series. This did come out at the same time, Test of Courage. We all know that, but this was kind of, I don't want to say recommended, but it really is. It's the recommended book to read first to get you started into this whole thing. And it is pretty crazy ups and downs. We have a lot to talk about this. Before we get started, I just wanted to say, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. It's good to see you. It's been a while since we've done one of these, so I'm really happy to be here, especially kicking off the High Republic and with the Light of the Jedi. Yeah, you doing good?
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Yeah, this one is gonna be pretty wild. We're gonna have a lot to do, me and you, and then on top of that, with Resistance broadcast stuff, there's gonna be all these new shows and stuff that we're just gonna have to figure out how much time we can devote to all of that.
Content.
Yeah, we'll let you guys know when we do get into spoilers. We're going to give a little bit of our spoiler-free review and kind of talk a little bit about that. If you're someone who wants to just get to it, I want to know what happened in the book. We also do have a what happened in the Light of the Jedi sister video, if you will, that is up on the channel now. And that is us giving no bias or opinion. That's just us talking about what happened, the straight up plot in this book. But now let's get into a little bit of, not the spoilers yet, but a little bit of the review. I'm going to ask you first, what was your score of this book and did you like it?
Well, I didn't actually write a review, but if I had to score it, and I've been thinking about this a lot actually, I did like it. But it was weird for me because I really liked it, but there were also some parts, when I first started reading it, I just was having a hard time with some of it. So I'm just gonna say somewhere between a 7.5 and an 8 out of 10. I didn't hate it. There's moments of it I loved, but ultimately Charles Soule had a really, really difficult task. And I appreciate that. He's a wonderful writer and nothing critical to say about his writing or anything like that. But as a novel, it jumped around so much. It almost felt more I've heard other people say almost more of a survey of what's happening. And that was kind of, right as I would get invested in a character, then, we'd be gone and we wouldn't see them for half the book. And then we'd go back there. And that was a little bit of why I didn't, to me, it wasn't knocking it out of the park. But again, a lot of moments I loved. Overall, it's a great introduction to the High Republic. And I highly recommend everybody who's going to read these books should definitely read this book.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at with it. So how about you?
Yeah, I'm actually really with you. I think I have all the books listed and I kind of just move a chart up and down, and Light of the Jedi sits smack between 7 and 8. So it's like a 7.5 for me. I got a couple books around it, like the original Aftermath, Thrawn Treason, Dooku, Jedi Lost,
totally.
Pirate's Place. Kind of these books I'm like, man, I really like that book, and there's a lot to dive into with that. My overall review is probably going to be that it's this book starts very complex. It felt like a Thrawn book or something where they're trying to explain the Chiss ascendancy. There's so much information that's being tossed at you. They're over here, there's these Jedi, and then up in these ships, there's these Jedi, and you're getting so many names and stuff thrown at you that it's very complex, and you're trying to just kind of take it all in, right? And that kind of speaks to the moment too. It's the Great Disaster, right? There's a bunch going on. I don't feel like the book really got its stride until it hit the section of the book where you can kind of say they were following 3 separate stories. There's how the Republic is handling this, how the Nihil are handling this, and then this subsequent story, which is kind of the crux of it all, which is, you know, how Loden Greatstorm and his Padawan are handling a very specific situation. Once you got into that, every new chapter where they would leave those characters and move on to the next thing, I was able to kind of, okay, we're returning to this story now. Okay, now we're in story 2. Okay, I got it. And I was able to follow that through. And when it all convenes at the end, I felt really good about the read. But I think this is a book that will suffer greatly on the first read and be more wonderful and enjoyable on a second read, or kind of like a discussion afterwards with somebody else like this, you know, kind of where people can talk about it and you can hear a little bit more. And that's why I think we're both like 7.5 or maybe a little bit closer to an 8, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and let's get into spoilers now. This is officially, we're past the review. We're going to talk about what happened in the book. I wanted to start off though with my favorite part of the book. There are a couple really good moments, but I think the part of the book, what does it say about me? The part of the book that brought me the most joy was Marky and Rowe at the very end of the book explaining his plot and his plan, and how everything that had happened was all because of a plan that he had. And he did the most savage thing you could think of. He turns on this lightsaber, and when asked about the farmer, what was the point of the farmer? Why did you even need him? He's like, I didn't really need him. I just needed the Jedi to go try to rescue him. He's not important. And while he's laying on the ground, knocked out, which is crazy to begin with, he never woke up from the gas. So when he passed out on that ship, it was the last he ever lived. Because while he's knocked out on the ground, Marky and Rowe walks up and just kind of like puts the lightsaber inside of him and moves it to cut him in half.
Yeah.
And just like kill the guy. Like, you're thinking this whole time, this whole book, that there's something special about this farmer that they're trying to hold hostage, and they're going to get this money for him, and there's some secret there. And to have him at the very end of the book just be like, oh no, he's not important. It's the Jedi that's important. This guy cuts him up, means nothing. I thought that was just a really cool twist on the end of the book, and really pushed forward this villain, which, you know, on Resistance Broadcast, we've talked about how Star Wars kind of has a villain problem. I like this guy as a villain. I think he's evil, and I think he could potentially really be something bad for the High Republic and the Jedi who protect it, if you will. What was your favorite part?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing I was just gonna say about what you're saying, like, I totally, like, I love how you point that out, because like there's no illusions after that, because you don't really know what his deal is. You maybe think he's just using the Nile for, like, you know, like maybe they're like a necessary evil, and maybe he does have like some moral ambiguity, but they're like, by the end of that book, you're like, no, this dude's bad, like bad news. But my favorite was actually the first. Kind of like the first introduction to the Jedi, where Avar Kriss is kind of, you know, there's the Great Disaster, which is the Legacy run splitting up in hyperspace, and the pieces are emerging in this system, the Hetzal system, and one of the pieces contains a great amount of Tabana gas, and you find out that the sun is very unstable, and if this, you know, giant payload of Tabana gas hits the sun, it's going to destroy the entire system. So Avar Kriss actually leaves. She's on this Republic cruiser. She goes down to the planet because, you know, to have a good connection to the Force, she needs to be connected to something living. Like, it's beautifully written too. She's kind of kneels in the, you know, like sits cross-legged in this field, starts kind of floating a little bit above the ground. Her lightsaber turns into this like Force antenna, and then her strength in the Force is that she can summon all the Jedi, or she can strengthen bonds between Jedi and, you know, create kind of a network of the Force. And so she calls all the Jedi from around the galaxy to basically knock this giant gas can that's headed towards the sun away, and they succeed. And I really liked it because it's just such a, in a way it's a flex, but it's also, it just establishes this this really cool moment where, you know, we've never seen anything like this in Star Wars with the Jedi and with the Force. And even though it is, you know, a bit of like, you know, this is the first 100 pages are like an action movie. Seriously, like there's just so much stuff happening. It's but at the most crucial moment, you know, with the Force, it really slows everything down. It's really serene. You know, all the Jedi are calm, and you can almost picture it and hear John Williams music like in the background, and then, you know, and they save the day. So I that really, you know, again, like when I started reading this book, I wasn't super crazy about it, mostly because it was just this huge action scene. But when I got to that, I'm like, okay, we're doing good. Like this is going to be fine. Like this book's going to be really good. So that was it for me.
That to me, in a way, kind of like take Star Wars, the movie franchise out of it, right? Because they do their movies a very specific way, right? But if this were like just a movie just in itself, I feel like you would go into this movie, it would cold open, and then like the whole thing would happen with the Legacy run and the Jedi, and it'd be this big battle, epic thing at the beginning, and she would go down to the planet, she'd calm everything down, and then like they would and then move the thing out of the way and all this. And then as soon as like everything was safe and they're like, we did it, we stopped it from happening, that's when you would get your title for like Light of the Jedi. And it's like now we're getting ready to get into this movie after that big major event happened. Kind of like Revenge of the Sith, I guess, that giant battle and the crashing of the cruiser and all that. And then it's like, oh, we're kicking this thing right off, right?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, so let's talk about the complexity of this book, because I feel like it was probably one of the heavier books as far as character names, and in some ways kind of like status and situation. It's kind of easy sometimes because you're thinking, you know, oh, it's the Republic and there's a Chancellor. There's also the Jedi Order. That's pretty familiar. The Nile were kind of complicated to get through. But I actually think the hardest part for me was just the amount of Jedi that they're throwing at you, especially knowing that some of these might not even be important in this book, and that but I still have to remember their name because I'm going to want to remember them with other ancillary properties and stuff.
Exactly.
So I felt like they were just like, and then there's this one guy and another guy and another guy and another guy, and not guys or girls, but people, you know, there's this one and this one and this one and this one and this one, and this one's in a jet, you know, and you're like, oh my gosh. So that was a big turnoff for me throughout the book. But like I said earlier, I think once it gets its stride, then you're like, okay, I figured out who we're talking about here.
Yeah. And you start to realize too, like, you know, who to focus on, you know, because you kind of get the way that Charles Soule writes it. You know, he puts he's really good at like putting emphasis on characters, and like if a character isn't there to do something, you know, important, they're usually just kind of gone. And then, you know that person's out there in the world, but yeah, he's good at that. But it's such an overwhelming, because like you have the Jedi hierarchy, which is like you have the Council, you have the Masters, then you just have the regular Jedi, then you have the Padawans, and you know there's that hierarchy, and then you're also dealing with the Nile, who, you know, they're split into 3 different divisions, and then each one of those divisions there's like a 3-tiered hierarchy as well. But for me, like, it was surprising.
And storms and stuff.
Yeah, strikes and storms, and you know, it's like they believe in nothing, but then they also do believe in something too. So you're kind of like, what are they fighting for? But it was, you know, I wasn't like, maybe it's because I was taking notes, but it didn't really disrupt the story as much as I thought it would in the beginning for me, you know, because I've read other Star Wars books where I'm like, you know, sometimes it can get very techno-babbly or that kind of thing. But, you know, again, like it's, you know, if you look at this book as kind of like a survey book, as kind of like, here we are setting the table. This is just kind of everything you need to know. Maybe you don't remember it all right now, but it'll make sense. But by the end of the book, I feel like the people and the things that you needed to remember were still there. For me at least.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that Charles Soule did a good job as far as like splitting the 3 stories? Because I felt like, I think I said this a little bit earlier, but I think like once I kind of had my established thing, I was able to kind of bounce around. And I actually think that he did a good job at doing this, because most of the time I find myself in Star Wars books absolutely hating when they're bouncing around.
Right.
Even if they try to make it really clear when it's like young Han Solo, old Han Solo, and we're bouncing back and forth. I'm like, I'm not following. I'm having a hard time picking up a chapter and realizing where we're at or what we're doing. And in this book, like I said, I think that every time I started a new chapter, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm with Loden Greatstorm. Easy.
Yeah.
I remember exactly where we left off, what the cliffhanger from a couple chapters ago was. And so in that sense, it actually was kind of an easy read once you got past the Great Disaster in the beginning section of it. And from that point on, I was like, oh, wow, great easy read.
Yeah, I do think he did a good job with that. And again, it took me a second to warm up to it, because I was, it's very much, I think you made the comparison when we were giving our ratings, but it's very much in the same way that that Aftermath kind of jumps around in the first, especially the first 100 pages of this book. Even though we're in the same location, essentially, we're in the same star system, you're all over the place. You're jumping around from different planets in that system, different Jedi, different people that are on different planets, witnessing kind of the social panic that's going on when they think that, their planet's about to be destroyed. And I was, initially kind of like, this is like, I'm having a hard time following this, but I'm just not like, I'm not getting invested in any of these characters. But by the time that, the introduction's over, like you said, I was able to ease into kind of and figure out who I was focusing on. And why, who the two focal people were in each thing, whether it's Avar and Elzar, or whether it's, Loden and Bell, and then back to the three Nile that are, essentially the Eye, Markian, and then the Tempest. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
there's something interesting about this too, because one thing is that the High Republic all got pushed back because of COVID-19 and the pandemic and everything. They pushed all that stuff back. And I know that there are people, specifically Charles Soule, that was like, guys, when you read this book, you're going to think that I wrote this knowing the pandemic was coming. Or that now that the date has been pushed back, we went and we rewrote or added parts to this, because it is so topical that it's unbelievable that this story is coming out at the same time that like what's going on just on our own planet, a real world situation. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because I'm reading this thing and I'm thinking like, okay, I get it. There's some connections here, but then like they just kept going deeper and deeper with some of this stuff where like, oh, we're gonna the chancellor, the person in charge, is cutting off access for certain people to bring in goods into that specific area, and you have people saying that's bad. That means you're gonna mess up the economy, and then you have other people saying no, they have to do that because it's unsafe. And it's it's so unbelievably realistically like how this would happen, because it is happening. It did happen. Like he wrote this book, and then literally like the same version or like our own version of this book kind of happened. I mean, I'll leave it up to you. Like what were your thoughts when you were reading through this book and thinking, this is real life?
I think I had read just the interview that you referenced with him. I think I read that maybe a couple days before I got my copy of the book, because it just showed up. I didn't even know when I was getting it. Sure. And I think, like I totally, I imagine like there was a little bit of that, but there was even a point I think where they referred to closing the hyperlanes as quarantining hyperspace.
Yes.
So it's like,
yes.
Like that, that kind of thing, it makes me wonder, was that in the first draft or did you add that in? But, I honestly think it really helped, it helped the reader and it probably helped him. You really have empathy for what the galaxy is going through, because you just think like, oh, they can just replicate food or but the sense of isolation that probably a lot of planets were feeling, the sense of helplessness that, like, let's say, your kids are on, because like my son, during the first 3 months of the pandemic, I couldn't see him because we don't live in the same city and it just wasn't safe to travel. But like, people that have family that are on, another planet or another star system that they can't get to, so that it really does kind of hit home in a way too. And it's, it's effective, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's like there's any like meta or like underlying political message or anything like that, whatever people's thoughts on the pandemic are. But I think it is like all the things that they put in there, whether they're intentional or not, you will pick up on them and they will resonate too. And it's, it's important. I think that that's good. Star Wars is really good at doing that and kind of capturing the moment. And, I think we all have had different things that we've stressed out and worried about during this pandemic. And I think there's probably something in there for everybody. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I 100% back what you're saying too, where it's like there's no underlying message here. There was no political thing. Had this book been written, like had he start writing it right now, and then this is the book that we got, we're gonna be like, okay, you were clearly influenced, and probably in that case there probably would have been a little bit of his own opinion in this thing. But I think since it so strongly was more like, now what do I think would happen? And he's telling this story in the sense that like he kind of has to tell it in a way that like a galaxy has to figure out how they're going to handle a great disaster. Like what do we do? He kind of wrote it well in the sense of like, sometimes Star Wars is kind of hard to follow the politics. You know what I mean? Like you're watching Phantom Menace, right? And you're like, oh, tax evasion. Or you're watching like the Clone Wars. It's like, oh, well, they're only going to allow them to get an additional loan, but it's like more percent, right? It's like,
right.
This is the kind of stuff where it's like, yeah, if you understand this stuff a little bit better, then you're like, yeah, they're telling the story as it probably exactly would happen. That would be kind of its own version of extortion or something, just to try to like drive up the cost or whatever. That's why this group of people are evil, or they do a lot of that stuff in Star Wars, but it has never been so relevant to the fact that like our entire world is dealing with a taxation route or whatever, and we're like, right. All of this stuff makes 100% sense because I had to understand it. I was forced to understand it because I was not allowed to leave my house. And when you're reading this book, you're thinking like, yeah, that's basically exactly how it happened. People arguing for and against the closing or the shutting down of the hyperspace lanes because they're too dangerous. But people saying, I don't think it really is that dangerous, and all this other stuff. Yeah, it all happens in the book, and it's really crazy. So I don't know. I felt like that had to be part of the discussion of how relevant this book is coming out at the specific time that it did.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought that up. I mean, it's really, whether you think, whether people think that the hyperlanes were, you could use them safely or they were totally dangerous and you just needed to shut them down. There's this unifying dilemma that everybody has to face, whether they like it or not. You have to decide what you're going to do for yourself. And so that's like a really interesting part of the book is that, the galaxy's facing the galaxy far, far away a long time ago is facing kind of the same unifying dilemma that our planet right now is facing. So it really does add like an additional like emotional resonance to this story and the state of the galaxy too. Because by the time the book ends, they're still not completely out of it. There still are going to be emergences. It's one of those things where like the galaxy has kind of changed forever. at that point too. So
all right, let's talk a little bit about the Nile. I wanted to get your opinion on what you thought about this as a ongoing enemy for the Jedi. Do you think that they, like, in some ways you're like, when I was first introduced to the High Republic, I was like, it's a bunch of pirates. You know, I was like, well, what do the Jedi fear most? And it's like, people who don't fear anything. It's like, okay. I mean, I guess. But what are your thoughts on the delivery of the Nile? Like, do you think they're going to be formidable opponents?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are going to be formidable opponents, and you know, it's interesting because they're presented in a way that, like, they, you know, Nile taken from nihilism, so maybe, like, you know, they believe in nothing, but at the same time they do believe in something, and yeah, Big Lebowski, totally, like, you know, they do believe in this like intangible way of life, which is just like total freedom, total, you know, ability to roam and do whatever you want. And, you know, in some ways, like, they see the Republic as a threat. And so, you know, like, the Republic, they're, you know, they have this starlight beacon, everything like that. But in a way, like, there's some people out in the Outer Rim that are probably like, wait, what are these people come, like, we're not all the Republic. Like, we didn't ask for you guys to come out here and, like, set up your Jedi temple and you know, they represent kind of the more militant side of that. And they want their freedom to roam and do whatever they want for the worst reasons. But they also, you know, they do kind of represent this, like, antithesis to the colonial aspect of the Republic. So that, like, there's on one side, like, there's some things that I'm kind of like, you know, I can see why, you know, people are probably really freaked out that, like, this, you know, mysterious order of space wizards with laser swords and this giant, you know, thing that kind of represents to the rest of the galaxy that I gathered from at this point was, you know, a very, like, wealthy, very, I'm trying to think of the right word, very kind of
well off.
I don't want to say, what's that?
Well off, or like,
yeah, very like well off.
I'm better than you, sort of.
Yes, very superior, you know, way of living, and they're kind of, you know, bringing. And I'm not saying that that's the Republic's intent, is to come out there and, like, you know, homogenize every planet that's out in the Outer Rim, but, like, but the Nile kind of represent that fear in a way. But that's, I think, what we're going to find them kind of fighting for in a way, and kind of waving a banner, maybe the same way that Dooku did in the Clone Wars, but in a much more sinister way. I mean, we don't know what Markian Ro wants, but we know he's bad. We know he's willing to disrupt the entire galaxy with this, you know, pandemic-like horror of shutting down the hyperlanes, and also, like, how many billions of people died while this whole thing was going on, because, you know, you don't see everything happening, but you hear whispers kind of through chapters of other emergencies that have happened. You do see that terrible that kind of cataclysm on Iriadu, Tarkin's homeworld, where, like, you know, billions of people die because they miscalculate something. So I do think they're going to be pretty bad. And yeah, I can't say anything about the book that I've read that comes out next month, but, like, they're bad. You know, they're bad, and they're definitely going to, you know, there's definitely going to be, I don't know. I think it's just going to get worse too for the Nile. I think we're meeting the tamest version of them. So
yeah, and that has a lot to say with Markian Ro, particularly because, you know, we've talked about this on our show, that Star Wars kind of has a villain problem. We like the idea of, you know, Moff Gideon being, like, this crazy guy who really is, like, villainous and really at the core is really bad. And when I'm hearing this story, when I'm reading the story, and I'm thinking about who is the the leader of the Nile, I'm like, this guy's gotta suck. Like, big time. And he is not only just, like, bad, like, in the sense that, like, he believes in this terrible cause, but he's also very, very intelligent, because the way that he kind of planned out this whole thing, Saw style, And even to the extent, now I'm not sure if you picked this up because I'm kind of gathering something from you that you said that Kassav miscalculated the coordinates. It's like, no, I think Marky and Rowe gave him bad coordinates in order to put him in an even worse position where he is like, give me the money and I'll protect you. And then when they ultimately give him the money, he was unable to protect them, and played it off like, oh, it must have been a miscalculation. But Marky and Rowe's like, no, I gave him the wrong coordinates. I wanted all those people to die to really give Kassav another major enemy and really get eyes on this group of people, which we're going to call all of the Nile. But it isn't. It's only really a third of him. And it's really only this guy because I just kind of want to get rid of him. I found multiple times that I would look back at how everything went down, getting a call to go rescue those farmers, you know what I mean? Or like what I just mentioned, or like sending Lorna D to go try to get the black box. Well, he explains all that, you know what I mean? Well, I had to have you there, and you had to be a formidable, person. And it just, all of it was so planned out that I was like, this guy's crazy. And then you kind of forget, but you look at his picture and he's got that big helmet with the eye in the middle and all this stuff. And just, I dig this character particularly. And I do really kind of think that he could be like those memes, those graphs, chaotic evil.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, some people just want to watch the world burn, that type of thing.
Yeah. Kind of thing. Like, he doesn't really have a purpose. I mean, they say that their purpose is to be able to live like that, but it's weird because I think that his purpose has become power hungry, and he just wants to see the world just annihilated, annihilate itself under him, you know what I mean? It's just, it's crazy. And I'm really excited about the potential for what kind of a villain that could be. I don't know, man. What else you got about this book? Anything else stand out that we haven't talked about?
I do really like how, and I think this will be true for all the High Republic, but especially this book, each time you meet a Jedi, you learn kind of what their specialty is with the Force. And you get the sense too that there's certain things that we are familiar with from like the prequel and the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy as well, that aren't really well known yet, like like Jedi mind tricks or just certain types of manipulations. And you find out that there's this Jedi, Azar Man, who we've talked a little bit about, who he's kind of a rogue Jedi in a way. He's not a master, but he could be a master. But he tries to use the Force in a different way every single time that he uses it. And even though the council is kind of like, I don't know why he's doing that, but he's discovered things about the Force that no one else has. Like, he's actually pushed their knowledge of the Force even further by doing this. So it's interesting too that like the Jedi Order at this time too, you get the sense they're a little more loosey goosey with like the dogma and the code, the Jedi code. You get the sense that maybe it became more rigid for a reason in the prequel eras, like when we meet them in the prequel eras, because Yoda's seen all of this. He knows everything that happens, and you get the sense that that this era is not going to really end on a great note. And so we're seeing them, where they're very confident and very calm and very secure in their order. And even though they're wary of the dark side, they're not like, it's not like oh my goodness, are you in the dark side yet? Oh, okay, you're not. Okay, cool. Whereas you get that sense in, immediately from the Phantom Menace, they're nervous about the dark side when you meet the Jedi Order for the first time. So I like that sense that we're exploring the Force, but it's not like necessarily happening with like the Sith looming over us or like the threat of the dark side. The Nihil are there, but like the Jedi are very, very confident in their relationship with the Force and how to use that. So I that was one of my favorite parts was learning more about that, the individuals especially.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I was able to see what they were saying about Azar Man and how he was utilizing the Force in kind of a different way. He just wants to become a master so that he can kind of go off on his sabbatical and just kind of just go and do whatever he wants, learn more about the Force. But right now he's kind of stuck being a knight. The interesting thing, though, is the way you connected that, I think, with where the High Republic ultimately ends up. And we often criticize the sequels for being like, you know, oh, they started this thing, but they didn't know where they were going. And maybe that is, in fact, something that the High Republic does, where they know they're going to start this thing off this way, but ultimately we need to get to a spot where the Jedi feel this way about the Force and the religion that they partake in, because ultimately we're leading up to the Phantom Menace, whereas, you know, episode 9 could be anything. They could lead to wherever they wanted. So they were just kind of like, let's just go down the path. This, they definitely know that they have to result in one specific spot, which is, you know, kind of something the prequels did. We have to end here. And so it's a little bit easier to kind of wrap up and get to a point where you're like, oh, well, we ultimately know that the High Republic is going to go this direction, but we're so far away from those stories at this time, and just having just started with this one book, or maybe just a couple like comics or whatever, we've got a long ways to go before we get to the end of the High Republic, which is, you know, supposedly at this point, I think set, you know, about 50 years before the Phantom Menace. So, you know, what happens? It's kind of a crazy thing, but
yeah.
But I think overall, I mean, I don't really have too much more to say about this book. I think that's pretty much, you know, everything that we can discuss. I don't know. Was there anything else you wanted to add about this particular book?
No, I think we've summed it up too. I mean, yeah, it's again, like, you know, go in expecting to be jumping around a lot. Don't expect to get to know anybody too well. But it does a great job of introducing a lot of characters that, you know, I'm really excited to read more about them. And you know, I imagine everybody's going to get their moment to shine with there's just so much content coming out in this campaign, or this initiative, whatever Lucasfilm's calling it. So yeah, so just take that, you know, when you go into this book, just think of it like that. Like you're just getting introduced to a lot of, you know, really cool characters and stories, and you know, it'll go further from there. So
this is just the beginning. But this is actually the end of this video. We're gonna wrap it up. That is our book discussion, spoiler filled, obviously, on Light of the Jedi. I like this one. I had a lot of fun with it. I think you did too. Excited for the future. If you guys want to give your thoughts, we will engage, you know, in the comments. If you guys want to leave comments on this video, please give us a like. If you want to give us a subscribe too, if you want to subscribe to the channel, you can see more book discussions with me and Kyle, or you can watch more prominently the Resistance broadcast, where I'm with John and Lacey, and we just talk about Star Wars news in general and other things like that. So come and hang out with us whenever you want. And that's it for now. We'll see where the High Republic goes. We'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Thanks, everyone.